Today, the story of a showcase, a shop where locals and visitors alike can find all the best of Irish craft and design, and the story of the family with the vision that put it together. This is The Architects of Business, Joe's weekly series of interviews with leading entrepreneurs in partnership with EY Entrepreneur of the Year. I'm Tadhg Enright, and today we'll be hearing from Marian O'Gorman of the Kilkenny Group, whose roots were planted in a thatched caravan beside Blarney Castle, selling souvenirs and spinning yarns to tourists. Marian, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us today. It seems to me you had a great role model in the field you're in now, and that was your dad. What did you tell us about the beginnings of the family business?
Well, before my dad even, there was his mum, Katie Downey was her name, would be my nan, had a shop in her front room in Killard, which is a mile from Blarney, and she sold teas and coffees and cakes and a small shop then with milk and waters and all that to people coming walking from Cork to Blarney and back again, or cycling, because there was no transport other than that at that time. So in her own way, she was in retail without even realising, or any of us realising what she was in. And then my father was a real ideas guy. He had always full of ideas. And the first one that I can really remember he talking about was he built a windmill. And why I'm saying this then, the kind of creative things he did after that. In his back garden in his parents' house when he was about in his late teens. And they had electricity when no one else in Killard had electricity because the windmill produced it for them. But then in the rain, in the lashing rain, he used to have to get raincoats on because it would stop and climb up to fix it again. He fixed watches when he was working in the mill. He used to make parts for Blarney Mills, which wasn't ours at the time. It was owned by Martin Mahoney's, really local. They were an English business people that lived in Blarney at the time, and he used to make them with his hands during World War II at a very young age. And then when he left there, he was in insurance. He had a dressmaking factory, he had a knitwear factory, he had a taxi company. He bought a cinema that had a dance hall and a cinema. And I'm sure I forgot some of the other things.
It's a long list, so I'm not surprised you don't remember all the details. I mean, do you think is enterprise or that entrepreneurial spirit is it in your genes, or did he learn it from his mum and did you learn it from him?
Well, I feel it is in my genes from the retail perspective and buying and selling, and why I say that is because when I left school at 16 after a secretarial course, I started working in the Tadhg cottage with him, selling errands to tourists. So
this was his first tourist enterprise. Tell us more about the thatched cottage and your own involvement with it.
I remember I was in 6th class in national school when it came down from Killard. So Blarney was very small at the time. There was no shop for sale. And in the insurance business, he used to go from house to house collecting insurance back then. Obviously, it's all now
before
online.
Direct debits.
And he saw loads of tourists come in on buses and going to the castle, kissing the stone, back down, nothing for them to do in Blarney, and get back on the buses and off again. So it came to him that he should open a shop and start selling stuff to tourists, so they stay longer in Blarney.
Okay.
So he built a thatched cottage up in his parents' back garden where he had the windmill. Well, the windmill was gone now at this stage, obviously. This was years on. And his friends and my brothers helped him build it. And it was built with concrete as well. It was very small. I mean, and actually EY, when we showed that back in 2014, the thatched cottage and the inside was, half a room size.
Yeah.
It was so small. And he was being pulled down by a tractor, so he had to have wheels on it. So the wheel came off on the way down the hill, because in Killard there's a big hill.
So the cottage was on wheels?
It was, and it was concrete because obviously it was going to be a shop, so it was very heavy. And then he thatched it. He found a thatcher. Do you ever hear of Castlemartyr Hotel?
I know the name.
In Castlemartyr there was a thatcher down there,
mm-hmm.
which he found it very hard to find one at the time, and he came up and thatched it. So it was actually what he was looking for. Now, I was only 12 or 13 at the time because I was still in national school. And I ran home from school, of course, to see the thatched cottage. But his friends, the wheel fell off the thatched cottage on the way down. And it was so heavy with the concrete, all his friends in Killard, now again no cars, had to help him lift it, get the wheel back on, and then on its way back down to Blarney, the tractor continued.
Talk about a team effort.
And when we got to Blarney, he actually parked it near the castle, of course, where were the tourists and the buses. But after a few weeks, the guards came over. Now, he was very friendly with the guards because he was a PC at the time, Peace Commissioner. And they said, Christy, I think you could move it over here and there won't be a problem. And then they moved a bit around the corner and then we stayed there for years.
So what kind of things were you selling at the beginning in the thatched cottage?
We were selling Waterford glass, which was very popular. We were selling souvenirs. We were selling Irish jewellery. Loads of errands. And packs of tweed. People would come and buy, and it was I think it was a length of tweed, and they would buy about 3 feet of it.
It sounds like a lot of the same things they're selling in tourist shops today.
Except the tweed packs and the wool. So yes, it is very similar to that. And God, I mean, we got known with the bus drivers, we got known with people, and we were a very busy store. Then he found, we opened in Blarney, in the Hotel Blarney. And then he bought a shop in the village Blarney, which we called the glass shop, because we had a lot of Waterford glass there. At the time, Tadhg, there was a real shortage of Waterford glass in the country because it was all going to America. We couldn't get enough of it. So it was even hard to get the stock. So I used to buy it before Christmas. That's when it was available because it was too late to go over to America. 2 or 3 weeks, and I was dealing with a woman down there called Phil Tunney, who'd give me a ring, Marian, the glasses stopped going to America. We have violet vases, we have bud vases, we have sugar and creams, we have Lismore glasses, we have this, that. Do you want to come down and see what we have?
And what did you do?
I went down and bought the lot. You have no idea. But it used to go up between 15 and 20% because of the shortage every January. So that means we got more margin when we sold it.
And listen, how old were you at this stage?
How old was I? I was in my early and late 20s at that stage.
Okay.
And taking a chance with 300,000, even sometimes more, for 3 small shops at the time. This was before Blarney Wool Mills. But it was the only way of getting glass. And I was the preferred. Blarney Wool Mills were the preferred customer.
When you contrast that education that you had in retail with the MBAs and the marketing degrees that kids are going after these days, I would assume you probably learned a lot more, because you do learn more by doing rather than sitting and reading textbooks, don't you?
Probably did. Yes, probably did. But I always felt the disadvantage of not going to college.
Really?
Always had a hang up over that. And why is that? Because when I meet people that went to college, they had lovely flowery words. And I was trying to use some of those words, sometimes out of context maybe. And it was only a few years, actually, EY in 2014 helped me with my confidence much more than anything else. Because when I went with them over, we went to Canada, I met all the other entrepreneurs and business people. They were all down to earth. It wasn't, I used to think entrepreneurs were in helicopters and coming in big Mercedes cars and limousines. That was my thoughts of what an entrepreneur was, not a business person that were grafting as I was, which a lot of them were at the time when I met them in 2014. That made me more comfortable about myself. So
what was it that you got out of that mingling with other entrepreneurs that boosted your confidence? Yes. When we went for EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2014 and we got through and we went over with them to Canada, remember Frank O'Keefe, he was there at the time planning it. Now he's the head person in EY, and he got me to stand up and I stuttered through, I don't know what I said, but anyway, stuttered through what I said. And then there was Bobby Kerr at the time, he was doing interviews, and they were just brutal. But it did start giving me the confidence when I met everyone as well, my peers, that they were all down to earth. They weren't using big words either, they were being themselves. And I learned from them that it's okay to be yourself and to use the vocabulary that I understand to get a point across, rather than trying to think I should be like someone else saying, using their vocabulary. So that was a huge step for my confidence.
And most years I've gone with them. Now China's coming up next year and Hong Kong, next year. So hopefully that's one that's in my diary, because you do meet people, you do get business breaks, you do get business opportunities, and you do get that extra boost of confidence.
But when you look back objectively, I mean, okay, so you felt like you didn't have maybe the vocabulary, but did it actually hold you back, do you think, not going to college?
Not really, no, not really. I was a real wheeler dealer, right? And then when I go to the suppliers, they were all men, and I charmed them with my talk, my smile, whatever, to get discounts, whatever. Everything. We really had the best deals in the country as a tourist store, and I know that and still have some of those today. But no, it didn't stop me, because I was persistent in what I wanted.
Do you think you got away with more, shall we say, in those
Yes.
negotiations than if actually, you hadn't been marrying and you'd been born Marian O'Gorman or something like that, and went off shopping that way?
Yeah, I definitely had the advantage, and I knew it. They very rarely could say no to me about my discounts. Like if I was looking for a 10% discount, I'd look for 25 first. And I might end up with 15 actually, which was probably more than I had gone out to get. But that was then for me a real buzz, because I achieved something I didn't think I'd get, So when I was, I will tell you a story about Bleak. This is really, I think, one of the stories when I look back in my life that even though I didn't know I knew what I was doing, but I didn't label it anything. So when customers came into Tadhg Cottage that time, they were Americans again, looking for Bleak China with the shamrocks on it. Mm-hmm. It was very popular, and it was almost as popular as Waterford Glass. Again, shortage, couldn't get it. And then they'd come in and I'd have to say, sorry, we don't sell Bleak, we don't stock it. But of course that then, was annoying me because I couldn't get it. So I said to Michael, who was my boyfriend at the time, let's go up and meet this guy, Stephen O'Neill, who was the owner and MD at the time. So we drove up, we had a meeting we set up with him and sat across from him, and we were really determined to get the Bleak China. So he said, I'll give it to you next year, right? So at least that was something. Mm-hmm. He was giving commitment. He didn't say how much, but we were going to get it.
You got some.
So we went round I said to Michael, let's go round to all the local shops. And I, being a wheeler dealer, just bought what they had. And we filled the car we had, I think it was kind of a van type car at the time, with Bleak China, and came back and sold it. And we didn't have the same margin because we bought it at retail with discounts, but we didn't say no to customers then,
At least you're keeping them happy.
We're keeping them happy. And then, of course, we shipped Bleak then at that time, as well as the Waterford.
So you were very much in there, from the beginning, really, or very close to the beginning with the Tadhg Cottage, and the building of this, growing at that time family empire in the world of tourist retailing. What was the kind of the power balance like at the time? How much were you, your father's subordinate, and do you remember when it kind of felt like you were becoming more like the boss?
I don't think ever. He had really great personality. He used to go on the coaches with Americans and tell them, look, take up his shoe and say, I have no soles on my shoe today. I need you to go in and buy so that I can put soles on my shoes tomorrow. Now, he was a very short guy, and they used to skit laughing at him.
Did they buy it?
Absolutely.
Did they take him seriously?
This is in the mill, this time in the mill. So I never could say I had his personality. He wouldn't have been, even though I did learn the wheeling and dealing from him, because we used to buy linen from Mr. Blair, actually. I was thinking of his name the other day. And he sold linen and tea towels with the Irish coffee recipes and soda bread and the Irish donkey. And then we'd buy those again in hundreds at prices, at discounts. Mm-hmm. So I saw him doing that wheeling and dealing. And I picked that up from him when I was only 16, 17. And then I learned to buy and sell. I wasn't just selling at that stage, I was also buying. And I used to go, another story, I used to go around to all the agents. We had agents making that they'd have 40 knitters each or 30 knitters each, knitting in their homes. And the agent would collect the garments, or would drop the household women. They used to make money this way, and then they'd send off, they go to the agents with the knitwear, with the jumpers, with the yarns. They'd check them, weigh them, pay them, and then I'd go to their house and collect it. And this was mainly in the winter as well, when the kids were at school. So I did it all.
You've got a lot of experience of wheeler dealing, as you say yourself.
Yes, I have.
What's the difference between, you going and being the buyer and trying to get a good price for your business, and then you being the seller? I mean, I know we're not generally in the business of discounting in shops in this country, but you must get some people trying to kind of get a good deal out of you. Well, what are the different kind of traits that you need for each scenario?
First of all, you know whether people are intending to buy or not, because you'd get that vibe off them. There wasn't a lot of tourist shops at the time, so there wasn't a lot of competition. So we had what customers were looking for: Bleak, Waterford glass, souvenirs, jewellery, errands.
So it was a seller's market. And you didn't need to discount.
And then, no, we didn't. And they'd be bringing lists of who they want to buy errands for and who they'd want to buy glass for, and we used to ship them for them. And they'd tick off the list, and then I'd say, have you any more family members that would like to buy a hen-knit Aran sweater? These are made in the homes of people. And I used to have the story where it's the honeycomb and blackberry stitches, and give them the story about the fishermen, that if they fell overboard, they'd be known by their... And this is all true stories from what I believe the Aran sweater was there for. And I always absolutely sold them more than they came to buy. Another, like this one, I used to go up to... in the knitwear factory, we had our stockroom of Arans. And I used to go up there to get the selection of errands if people wanted. I said, be down in 5 minutes, I'll have it. Say they wanted size 42 crew neck, and I had, this patch was so small that I'd only one and they'd no choice. And I'd go up, but then it might be not as many 42s as I thought up there. So I'd get a 40, I'd stretch it, because Aran sweaters handmade do stretch a bit, put a size 42 crew neck on it, or neck, and bring it back down. And it would be a size 40 because you stretch it, and you can do that with Aran. When I look back, I should have I had no conscience, but that was but I used to have a guilty conscience over doing that.
People talk a lot these days, with modern retailers competing with online retailers, and they talk about now shops have to put on an experience for people, something that they can't get when they're clicking online. You were doing that with your storytelling back in the day, weren't you? You were giving people a little bit of the Irish experience as well as the Irish merchandise.
Absolutely. And we still know the Waterford glass, where it was made, how it was made by hand. We ship it because we were able to ship it for them. So, yeah, I was saying, but it was just a natural thing to me. I didn't think about it. It was just natural. I got that buzz. When people get a buzz out of smoking or drinking, whatever else, I got that buzz.
For you, it was buying and selling.
Buying and selling and looking after customers.
And preferably selling.
And selling more than the people wanted. And when the figures started really increasing, and then when we had the 3 shops, I would go from one to the other with certain stock, because we'd have people in different stores, very good people at the time, and still have. And I would be getting, if they'd ring me, look, we need a Waterford glass, they want to see a Waterford Lismore decanter, or they want to size a button up and with pockets, or they want a honeycomb sweater, and I went from shop to shop with that to get it. If it wasn't in the warehouse, I would have known. I'd have bought it down to the shop in the castle or the Tadhg cottage, or I'd have gone down to the one in the hotel. Anywhere.
You talk about going from shop to shop, and at that stage, I think you said you'd 3 around Blarney, but of course you've got an awful lot more now. What were the big milestones along that road when the company really, really grew? I suppose Blarney Williams was the biggest one when that came, when 1975, when we bought that. But before that, it would be really growing the sales. And in the Hotel Blarney at the time, we used to stay open until late at night, and when people after dinner, and then they'd come in and they'd say, I might buy that in the morning. And what would I? I'd be there in the morning to see, and a lot of people did. But then it was the Blarney Woolly Mills. That was kind of a bit frightening at the time for all the family, because my father had a dream, we didn't at the time. He could see what he could do with the mill, and that was the same mill that he worked and fixed the machines in. It was being sold at the time when it was up for sale. It was being sold to a Canadian company by Martin Manny's, but by the auctioneers. It was a Cork auctioneer. And they were selling it to the Canadian company, but my father was offering the same money. So he couldn't understand why they wanted the preference with a Canadian company. So he went into I think Keane Manny Smith at the time, were the auctioneers, and he bombarded them until they sold it to him, not to the Canadian company, because he was offering the same money. Mm-hmm. And I think he then asked us all to remortgage our houses by an extra $5,000. And that was 7 of us, 35 grand. And this is the 70s, so 35 grand back then is a lot more money than it is today.
And then the bank
obviously
gave him the balance, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a big property, a big mill. And it was a lot of money for us to remortgage.
A big ask.
It was a big ask.
So remind me, how many siblings do you have?
7. There was 7 of us. I'm the fifth down.
Asking each of you to take out a $5,000 loan against your houses. It must have been, I suppose, an exciting but also a scary time of what you were taking on.
It was very scary at the time. Looking back now, sure, it was a huge success. He knew what he was doing. And I remember when we bought it, first year or so, we didn't open it because when you had those knitwear factory that used to make wool in the mill, actually it wasn't knitwear, it was they used to make wool and tweed in the mill before we bought it over. And we used to buy from them. We used to buy the wool for the errands, and we used to buy the tweed for the packs. Mm-hmm. And we'd always buy the leftovers of tweed, maybe the short runs, and get a better price from that than for the tweed. So, but the oil that was on the floor was, I don't know how many inches thick from all the machines over the years. I mean, Martin Manny's had it for hundreds of years. So he had to get it all chipped off, and caustic soda. It took a long time to clean the floor back from the oil and all that. And when it opened, we only opened half at first, or even a quarter of it. So by degrees, when we got a bit more confidence, and the buses did pull in, and then we opened the restaurant so that they could eat there, and then we opened the hotel. But they were my father's dreams at the time. But we were running it. He never ran it, actually. He handed it to us. Then he only made the deals, did the job, and then handed it.
But I guess you all had your own money on the line at that stage.
We had, and we had to make it work. And every one of there was 5 of us, 4 or 5 of us in the family that time in the business. So we all had our own different things. I ran the mill. All the siblings would have run Dublin, the shop in Dublin when Blarney Women's experience, or when it got bigger, enlarged, and then there was Killarney. So it was a brother that ran that, and then the knitwear factory up there, my brother Pascal and Frida was running that at the time, and we were all running, but I was running the mill, the retail.
So that was the real kind of transformative deal. It turned you from the people who ran a few shops around Blarney to ultimately the people who had a nationwide chain.
Yes. But it was in the mill days before we had it before we grew nationwide. Right? The mill that we bought in 1975, we hadn't the experience of managing a bigger company. Family businesses manage a different way than corporate businesses or professional businesses. We didn't know any of that at the time. We thought everyone was the same as ourselves. Of course not. But we didn't. We look back and say, how could we even think that way? So we had a strike back in 1982 in Blarney Woolen Mills, and that was really an eye-opener for us. It lasted 3 months, and that was huge learning because few buses passed the picket line, but not that many. And we were very upset, and we found it very hard to how it could happen, number one, and what we should do. So we joined IBEC. Someone said, join IBEC quickly.
The Employers Group.
Employers Group, yes. I met a very good guy in there called Donna, and he really did help us, but it took a while because they were very militant at the time, and we had not been used to it.
What were the staff upset about, and how did you resolve it?
Looking back, it could have been over pay or it could have been over hours. I really can't. But it's recognition as well. They wanted, because over those things. Now, it was only the once off. We've never, ever in the company have had an issue or a strike since in Blarney or in Kilkenny, because we now understand how people like to, it's important that we treat our people in respect and pay them what they should be paid and all of that. So during the strike, we had a pub, which we opened the pub with a restaurant, and we all went in, all the family, one night and drowned our sorrows. We were looking out at the picket outside, and we had just had a meeting, I think, with someone, IBEC or someone that were advising us, and myself, we all got drunk at the night. You wouldn't blame us. We're so upset, and that was our own fault. We didn't know any better. So that night, my daughter Melissa was conceived.
Oh, wow.
Out of that strike. And we called her, obviously she was born 9 months later.
Mm-hmm.
In 1983 she was born. So we called her Strike Baby. So she got married there a few weeks ago, and she stood up and told the story herself being called.
Makes for a great wedding story.
It was, she did.
Yeah, I'm glad that Melissa stuck and not Strike Baby as a name.
Yes. And another thing with Melissa, when I was in hospital to have Melissa, right, you won't believe this, I was in hospital because it was time to buy the water glass, get it ready, and I knew what stock we had. I was checking the stock, and all these reams of paper that the old computers had, there were green lines. I had that in the hospital bed. You won't believe it. Like my husband was all in, and there were what are you doing? And checking our stock, checking what stock Waterford Glass had and what we'd need to buy. But it took nothing out of me. It's like I was 29 at the time, actually, when Melissa was 29. So it didn't take a shake out of me because I wanted to get the order in. So when it goes up in January, we had the glass and the right glass. So that's the way I am. I was a workaholic type.
Yeah, well,
I look back now.
What does that story, I suppose, tell you and tell all of us as a lesson for kind of the compatibility of being in business and motherhood?
Yeah, I suppose when I look back, and everyone looks back, and all mothers feel this. You look back, and I was really that workaholic. I was addicted to work a bit. I think it was a confidence thing with me. I was trying to prove to myself and to my father that I could do it, because he actually put one of my sisters on a pedestal, and I was never seen as anyone that could do it. Even I didn't think myself, absolutely not. That really kind of, I was always trying to prove to him, and I think he died, and I hadn't proved it to him, I think, but I had to prove it to myself then. So I would now look back and say, I wish I'd done it a little bit different and given more time to the family, being a woman, being their mum. And I can't take it back, but I do spend a lot of quality time with them now. And we go away for weekends. We actually go to Liam's place in Monarch, 4 of us. We really enjoy that, you know.
But do you think, is it always, and has it always been, and is there a risk that it always will be, a kind of an impediment to women in business? The sense that you have to be always on, but it's only women that carry children.
Yeah.
Or certainly at the pregnancy stage, obviously. After that, it should be all hands on deck. But, do you kind of worry about that, or how do you treat your own women staff when it comes to them having kids?
Well, they all get their maternity leave, and if they need to take time off beforehand, so whatever they need, they get, because we have very good people that work hard. So you have to give back what you get. My own daughter had a son 12 months ago, Michelle, Ryan. He's gorgeous. And I would take him staying overnight and things like that. So she took more, didn't take full maternity, but I stood back, because I know if I had said anything to her about taking a particular time off, she knew what I did. I took 2 weeks in maternity leave. She knew all that. She didn't want to do what I did, and I don't blame her.
But still not full.
No, she didn't. She took about 3.5 months off. And then she started back 2 days a week, 3 days. And then maybe after 4 months, 5 months, she was back full time. Now, I didn't have anything to do with that. I stood back. But I can see she still feels guilty. I must get home to Ryan tonight. I'm going to travel 2 hours because I want to go home to Ryan tonight. And I'll travel another 2 hours tomorrow. I want to be home to see him. So there is that guilt thing. And now when I meet women in business through EY, as well as loads of other, that guilt is still there. They find it hard to balance the two, and it is hard.
Yeah, no doubt it is.
So I would have regrets.
And I understand you let your daughter make her own decision in that regard. But you talk about the guilt about leaving, not paying enough attention to the kids. But is there also a guilt that actually I'm letting perhaps my career down if I take my full maternity or something like that? Do you sense that amongst women in business today?
You would sense that, and I did feel like that I had that awful drive that drove me to do this. And why would I only take 2 weeks? But I had very, very good people minding the kids at home. It was always someone, and I used to tell the person minding Mary, was for years, Mary, you are the most important person that I employ in my company, or that you work for me. We treated her more like a family member rather than working for us, and she was with us 20 odd years. She only left there recently, and she was fantastic. If I was away on business buying and one of the kids were sick and in hospital, she'd go in with them, stay with them. So we had some great people, but no matter what I do now, I look back, I can't take it back. I can't live the past. So I have to get on with it, and I can give Ryan now, Michelle's son, loads of extra time, which now she loves to see that happening, and give her. I mean, I said, give the kid. They're all grown up now, go away for meals, and we're conscious of making time for each other, which we wouldn't have before. Lots of lessons learned.
Marian, did you see the financial crisis coming?
Back in 2008? Not really. Not really. I left kind of all the financing to my finance director at the time, at any time. So maybe the year beforehand things were really getting tough.
And we saw, I remember in the news, it was like Lehman Brothers this, and a lot of us who didn't know much about these things at the time. I mean, it was kind of at the beginnings of my career in business journalism, and I was just kind of learning what it was all about. And it's all pretty confusing.
It was very confusing. And as I said, I'd leave most of the finance to the finance director. But yeah, probably the year beforehand, we probably were dipping, our sales were starting to dip. And we knew, but we didn't know it was going to come so hard as it did. And I remember waking up one morning and saying, oh my God, how are we ever going to get through this? Because things were closed, stores were closing down. Things were happening, you know, people had less money and they were worried. There was unemployment was starting to increase. And yeah, I did get very worried, but I kind of then I have to then kick into positivity, because if you get so negative into something, it really brings you back, and then people feel that from you. So if I was going to be negative or feel the pressure, what's going to happen? It's going to cascade down to everyone.
Yeah. So how did you?
I have to kick myself into positivity mode.
Right. So focus on the positives. You thought positive. What did you do?
Well, I knew that we have a very good customer service and a huge cost in our customer service. I mean, 13 or 14% of our turnover would go into the team on the front of line, which is a lot higher than some other models.
Really?
Much
so
higher.
You spend a lot more on being, shall we say, the smiling face at the counter or wherever.
Yes. And giving giving product knowledge to customers, telling them about the product, being there to sell, keeping the store nice, and all of that kind of thing. So I just thought to myself, if it comes to it, which it didn't, we didn't have to do that. We can reduce the customer service levels for a while, and maybe make it 10 or 11%, which would keep a company like our size that time going, because that was a huge difference between 14% and say 10 or 11. So I knew that in the back of my head that could be done and still trade away with that. Another thing we did was, because of the recession then, we did a tour around to all of our stores, number one, and we talked, and we're very open with our team all the time. We tell them our figures, we tell them daily figures, weekly figures, margin, year-end figures.
Because it's
a lot
important.
of Irish companies don't do that.
It's important they understand what's happening behind the scenes,
exactly.
I suppose.
And we said we may have to cut salaries at the time and wages at the time, but it would start with us if it did. If we had, and a lot of other companies were cutting that time between 5 and 20%. We did not cut salaries, number one, but we did say we might have to. We didn't have to. And number two, we were able to get leases in the shopping centres that we couldn't afford before. We couldn't pay the kind of money they were looking for, the landlords. So we got some very good leases and deals at the time, and we opened 7 stores.
So you grew rather than shrank.
Yeah, we did.
And was there any part of you that kind of said, God, it's stormy now, but there could be worse to come, and okay, this shop is looking pretty cheap, but I'm going to end up spending money on staff and kitting it out, and would it be was there going to be a good outcome? You're looking at me saying, not a minute. Not a minute,
not, no. I remember in our first store that we bought after during the recession, just before the recession, it was Stillorgan. And I remember it was the auctioneer was saying to Mark, was our finance guy, you should look at this, there's a shop coming up. It's just a uniform shop, it used to be in Stillorgan. And actually some of the family members went up and spent a couple of Saturdays up there, and they all came back, don't open. But I knew we had to grow. We were just staying too long the way we were after splitting from Blarney. We had a tough time. We didn't grow during that time because we had some of our issues with the SARS, with the foot and mouth, with the 11th of September. So we had very tough beginnings when we separated, demerged from Blarney. And I said, no, we just must. It was a gut, nothing else. I hadn't gone up. And we opened, and was one of our best stores, and still is. So then that gave the confidence to everybody that we could do this.
You mentioned there, as you call it, the demerger from Blarney. It's not something we've covered yet in the conversation. Just talk to us a little bit more about how the business evolved in that period, because you're no longer just kind of focused solely on tourists. You're as likely to be selling, you know, homewares to locals now as well with the Kilkenny Group.
And in some of our stores, it's all locals. Then the shopping centres, because you wouldn't get tourists in there. So, Tadhg, I'm after forgetting the question. Tell me again.
That's all right. Again. So we'll just pick it up from that last question. So
the demerger, isn't it?
There was the demerger, yes. So you had just mentioned the demerger, Stillorgan opening a new shop and all that kind. Okay, I'll remember now.
Okay.
Talk to me a little bit more actually about how the business had evolved around that time, because you mentioned there, and we haven't covered it yet, the demerger of Blarney. You're no longer, or were no longer at that stage, a shop just selling to tourists, selling tourist things to tourists. You was likely to be selling homewares to locals now.
Yeah. Okay. So back in the 1990s, it was difficult. Family business got more difficult because I thought we should bring in professionalise the company, bring in external people, and I actually did bring in a guy that to run the mill, who was a retailer at the time, because he was more professional and he was really doing a good job. So, but other family members had a different idea. They were saying, well, it's not broken. There's nothing broken. Don't fix it. But I really thought that we should be looking forward rather than and being better at what we do. So we had disagreements about that. So then I left the company, demerged from it back in 2000. But there was a bit of family conflict back then. So I had been saying to myself, there's no way I'm going to let that happen in Kilkenny in the new business when the family members ever come in. So I'd learnt again, this was a hard lesson when you have family and business together, it can very often cause conflict. So when we went into Kilkenny, I actually got what is it called? It was I can't remember now. Family constitution written up, and we got a professional company to do it in Dublin. They had been used to doing these constitutions. They recommended it. Now, did I question everything? No. I did not. Did I understand everything? I thought I did, maybe not. It wasn't as written as well as it should have been written. And that was the one thing then that caused a bit more conflict down the line for me, up to recently, because we had that constitution in place, caused the problem, even though I put it in for the fact that it wouldn't cause a problem. So I still learn more to learn, obviously. Someone said, you've got more to learn here, and this is the next thing.
You mentioned that, and it has been in the papers recently, the conflict within the family. How does it feel to see that played out in newspapers and people reading about it? What does it do to you, not just as a business person, but as a mother, as a wife, as a sister?
Oh, sure. I could not believe this would have happened to me. If anyone said to me that years earlier that this is going to happen, I wouldn't believe it. I actually couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that the way it happened, how it happened and why it happened. That's why I would not go on the papers for anything. It was just, no, we had someone that would handle the press for us, and it was always no word, nothing. So, yeah, it was very disappointing after putting Constitution in, after the lessons I'd learned. And I thought I had it all planned, that it would never happen. So it was very difficult for us as a family, and still is, but we have to get on with it now. So 3 members are in the business, and my son is doing his own thing.
Okay.
So it's played out to that.
Is it hard to put these things behind you as a family? To separate out the familial love from the professional relationship? It
can be, but now I will make sure that never happens again to my other 3. I don't care what I say or do or what they say or do. I'm just never going to let that happen again, because it's not worth it. It's really, I know you have to do it for the business, but it damages the family. And then when it comes to having to make that decision, it's really very hard. So, no, I wouldn't wish that on any family business. Any.
Time hopefully will be a healer, and hopefully you'll be able to
absolutely
to put that all behind you someday. What about the next stages for the company? Now that the dispute is resolved, what's the next chapter involve?
Well, retail is tough, so we have to be on our game all the time. because online is really, people are going online for convenience and get deliveries at home. So we have to do more of the experiences, we said a while ago. And also we just bought Kilkenny Design last Tuesday. We signed the deal.
So just explain that a little bit for us, because lots of people will associate you with the Kilkenny brand, and there is that big shop on Nassau Street in Dublin, and lots of others around the country. But then the shop that was in Kilkenny City was different. Now it's the same. That's
it. It was back in 1989. The government had the two stores. They set up Kilkenny Design in Kilkenny to bring and brought in people from Europe to see what design element was in Ireland, and they found a lack of design in Ireland. So they set up the Kilkenny Design with all these workshops. Then they set up a store back in 1965 to sell the products the workshops were making, the guys in the workshops were making. And then they opened up in Dublin in 1979 to open up to the tourist and the Dublin market. And they sold it then in 1989, I think.
The shop.
1969 they set it up. In 1989 the government sold it, but it was sold as two different identities, or
different shops.
Two different shops
with similar names.
There was a management buyout in Kilkenny, and Blarney Woolen Mills, which I was involved at the time because it was back in 89, bought the Kilkenny shop on Nassau Street, because Blarney Woolen Mills had a shop in Nassau Street and they didn't want anyone to buy it, so that we'd have to compete with tourists in the same street. So it was done strategically for that reason. And that's almost 30 years ago now. But everyone was confused with Kilkenny Design, because we couldn't use Kilkenny Design because that was given to the shop that was in Kilkenny. That was bought by a management buyout. And then we called ours Kilkenny because it was known as Kilkenny Design. So it was very confusing. Customers could come in with their vouchers to us, or exchanging products. We'd say that's not our store at all, and they'd be really upset.
And confused.
And then vice versa, they did to Kilkenny. So about a year ago, the owner down there said to me that she's thinking of selling. So that had to be part of our company again.
The natural thing to do.
So we met a few times, and she wanted to sell it to someone that would continue with the Irish design and the element of the workshops down there. So of course we are the good fit for that, and it's bringing back the whole roots of Irish design, and now for us that will help us in the future to create even more of an experience.
At this stage, where's the balance between where your customers come from? Are they local? How many of them are locals? How many of them are tourists?
Well, if you take the group, 80% would be domestic and 20% tourists.
Wow. I didn't expect. I thought it would be a lot more touristy.
Anyone, if we were at an interview and we'd say, guess, no right or wrong answer, what percentage of our customers are tourists versus domestic, they'd all say 70 or 80 tourists and 20 domestic. But Christmas time is our busiest time, and that's all domestic. And then in Dublin, probably 75-25. But then remember, we've all these stores that you don't get any tourists in. Now, we do have two sister stores in Killarney and Cove, and they're fully tourist. They're green. There are green stores, green, white and gold stores.
You've got leprechauns everywhere.
Leprechauns and Waterford Glass and all that. And they're doing very well for us. But they would be where we take in our tourist turnover and Nassau Street. Some of the other stores would have no percentage of tourists. So easy.
So how important is that kind of original vision of even, Kilkenny itself, the government Kilkenny, the Irishness of it all? How much do you prioritise Irish-made goods, and do you think twice before you stock those produced elsewhere?
Well, we have a real issue at the moment. We have 125 Irish designers made in Ireland. We would have another 30 or 40 Irish designers not made in Ireland.
Designed but not made.
Designed, not made in Ireland. And then you do have some of the international products, because they give a choice and price points to our customers. And we have briefed our buyers to go and buy and grow more of the Irish products, because we know that's our future, because you can't copy it in the high street. They really can't copy this handmade, because each individual piece is made by hand. So if you see two pictures and they're similar, they're both different because they're made different. So we feel that's going to be a real strength in the future. So we want to lessen our dependency on international and more on the Irish design. And now Kilkenny Design is going to even help us more to understand all that and to even grow. And that's where we find that differentiates us from other competitors. And it is, and I do believe the road forward for us. It's how well we do it and tell the story about the designer, where it's made, how they make it handmade, and do more of that. And we're working on that at the moment.
And I guess the strength in that is, and I'm probably a retailer's worst nightmares. I walk around a shop and I'll look at, item X, and I'll instantly go online and see, can I get it cheaper online? But you can't really do that in a shop like yours, can you? Because you're probably not going to get that piece of handmade pottery on Amazon or something like that.
Not on Amazon. You would get it on some sites in Ireland, and definitely on our site, but you won't get it on Amazon or anyone. Now, if you think about it, if we were designing and making in China, we would have a higher margin than we'd have being made in Ireland. So we are at a disadvantage. We really can't discount the Irish products anything like, say, our competitors can. So we have to be careful there what we do. But we feel that's the road forward. The more we do, and Tadhg, your Christmas shopping this year, Kilkenny has to be the place for that, because all the individual products, handmade, individually made, they're unique, no two alike, and you have to think about the person that you're buying it for.
You're very true. You're very right, and I'll be sure to put it on my my shopping itinerary. Listen, do you still work as hard these days as you used to?
Almost, not really as hard, because Michelle and Melissa, now my two daughters, one is head of buying and one is head of retail. And they would do an awful lot more of the work. That's why I don't come to Dublin as often. And this is only in the last maybe 3 years or 4 years that they have the confidence to do that. And they do a very good job, so I don't have to worry about it. So I do take a bit more time, but not enough. I mean, I felt last week I actually hit a wall because I work too many hours at night time, do my laptop, because I have no secretary or anything. My laptop is, I do all these things myself. There's no ongoing blarney we did have, but you then didn't have laptops, so you didn't have you answering yourself type of thing. So it's just, I have to stop. I have to spend time on working a bit less now, and I know that.
Spend time. I mean, is that a lesson you've had to teach yourself, actually? The importance
of
it.
I'm in the midst of it now at the moment. Yeah, because I really felt I hit a wall last week, that I was my back was at me, this was at me, that I was so tired. And I knew that I wasn't giving the business the right decisions because I wasn't thinking.
This is just last week.
Last week. If we had this interview last week, I probably would have cancelled out.
But the way you talk about that is almost as if it's never happened to you before. I mean, have there not been other times where you've kind of felt just a bit overwhelmed and you've just had to put down the laptop or stop answering the phone and just give yourself some Marian time?
Sometimes, very rarely, it would be it'd be more around the conflict time rather than and I do hate conflict. So I stay a lot away from conflict as much as possible now. But sometimes, but not a huge amount of time. I have an awful lot of energy. And I still have, they used to call me the Duracell bunny. Wind her up and leave her go. But yes, I do want more time. And therefore the girls are taking more. And I have a very good finance guy now, Connor, and we really have super people working in the company that I don't have to think about it. If they make an odd mistake, and I would say to myself, that's the learning. Can't do it for them.
We've been talking a good bit about how retailing has changed. I mean, are you full of confidence about the future of it, or is there some kind of lingering feeling that something fundamentally might shift that could spell trouble for you?
Well, of course we're cautious now with the way online is growing, and the way retail and footfall is difficult. And on Nassau Street especially, we've had the Lewis Works, and now the Lewis has changed all the dynamics of the way people walk. Also, footfall in most stores that you nearly see, maybe not Pennies now or some of those, are down in footfall. The sales are higher for the footfall because we're selling more to the people that come in. But it is a concern that online is going to be bigger. We know we have a lot of work to do online. And that's where we're looking at the moment, in investing more in that. We have Kilkenny Design. We're looking at another smaller acquisition in February. So and we know now where like, you know, tourism isn't going to go away. There's more tourists. I was just at a tourism seminar yesterday, and the prediction is that'll be up 4% next year to 11.6 million.
And on
That's
balance,
good.
you can probably rely on tourists to
We
come
can
through your
rely on
doors.
tourists. We have to work harder now to get the tourists in as well. And upstairs to the restaurant, tourists love the restaurant. The food is good. We make it all in our own kitchen. It's not bought in.
I've had
So
it
it's-
plenty of times. My
yeah,
mum
it's-
loves it as well.
It's genuine. Yeah, and so again, with Kilkenny Design, it's going to be the same. Our new acquisition will have food and tourists coming to it as well. So I suppose we have to make sure now that we're going in to develop into the areas that we know that we're sounder in, rather than just going off and saying we'll open here, there, or anything that comes up. So yeah, we're cautious. We have to think twice about it.
So you were saying earlier you've started kind of handing over the reins somewhat to your daughters. Will there ever? It strikes me. I don't think there'll ever be a time when you'll entirely relinquish the reins. Will there?
I'll always want to work, I think, but as I said, they're doing good, and the senior team have really some good. We brought external senior people in, and they really have lots of new ideas and lots of way of driving the business. Our finance guy came after 23 years from Kerry Group, so there's loads of experience, and we have Emer who joined us, and we've very good people around now, and they're helping, but giving up the reins. Actually, it's hard because if you know, who's the person that wants to take the reins? This is where I'm at. Who'll actually drive it and wants it? And my daughters are both ages that they still want the family life balance for themselves, which I can fully understand. So I'll stay with it another time, but if I can, and as long I can get more time out, but then I do really want to draw back fully as in the next few years. That's the plan anyway.
Because we all need a rest sometime.
Absolutely.
Even the Duracell bunny.
I know. I know.
Marian O'Gorman, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Tadhg. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on The Architects of Business. Thanks to our guest, Marian O'Gorman, our producer, Patrick Hohey, and all of the team here at JOE. Our show is made in partnership with EY Entrepreneur of the Year. Go to JOE.ie to learn more about the finalists for this year. And don't miss out on past or future editions of The Architects of Business by subscribing for free on iTunes, on your favourite Android podcast app, or you can watch us on YouTube. And there's plenty more JOE shows out there too, including Baz and Andrew's House of Rugby and Ireland Unfiltered with Dion Fanning. I'm Tadhg Enright. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.